Hello, I'm Alex. Tonight, my job is to help you convince your friends that we need to take immediate action on climate change and that the actual world that is heading towards us, if we don't act, is much more severe than the governments are telling us. And this is incredible that within 15 years, the world will be entering a state where we have mass starvation, mass extinction, all sorts of horrible problems unless we act quickly. So, how can I bring up the people to speed on this? The basic concept being that if we all, humanity, unite, the governments will have to do our bidding. The people in billions have an impact. So, this drawing here shows what we're doing, which is creating fossil fuels entering our atmosphere, which is creating greenhouse gas accumulation, CO2 and methane in our atmosphere, which are heating the planet. And at the same time, we have removed some of the masking aerosols in the atmosphere, coal and sulfur dioxide from shipping, and this as this filter, which is so what happens with coal and sulfur dioxide and things like that is that short term they create a temporary cooling. If you have a heavy coal haze over a city, it becomes quite cold. But long term, it's producing lots of greenhouse gases. So long term, for hundreds of years, the planet is gradually heating. And so what happens here is we have an Earth energy imbalance, the removal of this masking of these aerosols combined with the accumulation of greenhouse gases, where the Earth is not able to radiate out to space enough heat to keep its temperature in check, but more and more heat is being absorbed by the Earth. And in the last 5 years, the scientific reports have created a lot of momentum about this problem. And what this does is it causes global temperatures to increase. So I'm going to stick to my notes here for a moment and not speak extemporaneously. Most people talk about climate in terms of weather. So we're going to talk about this as being the planetary checkbook. But for us, it's a matter of physics and a planetary checkbook. The term EEI, Earth Energy Imbalance, right now, humanity is creating this Earth energy imbalance. We are forcing the planet to keep more heat than it can release. And the action, and if we look at the human forcing in this diagram, let's see if I can find that, increases forcing. We are the impulse pushing the system. So up until now, it's been man injecting carbon into the atmosphere and nature trying to absorb it. And this is leading the seas to be heating. It's leading to the seas to be acidifying, which means that coral reefs and shellfish will not be able to create shells because calcium carbonate can't exist in a more acidic ocean. And it's also creating stratification of the ocean so that the warm waters aren't mixing with the cold waters, which also damages our ability to keep a carbon cycle in balance. So if the carbon cycle of the Earth, which is an enormous process, goes out of balance, we will heat, and this will destroy our agriculture. And if we think we have problems with agriculture falling apart, the birds and the bees and all of the other creatures have much more severe problems because they don't know what's going on and they can't adapt. So it also creates mass extinction. So the Earth energy imbalance leads to global temperature increase. The global temperature increase leads to methane release from permafrost and other sources, which in turn heats the planet even more. So this is a vicious circle. And this leads to ice melting, which leads to the ocean having more of this problem. The warm water and the cold water are not mixing. It also leads to the Earth being darker because we're losing more of the reflectivity, which leads to more heat. And then, of course, this heat leads to the forest burning and the dry tropics, which you can look up that term, but that's basically tropics north of the deep Congo and the deep Amazon, or it could be south, but largely north. These are forests that are going to burn, and this is going to again lead to more loss, more darkening of the earth when they burn, more heating of the atmosphere, which will lead to less reflectivity. Now, the ocean heat absorption will also stop the Atlantic meridional current, which will make England very hot in the summer, although the overall temperature of the UK will drop a lot, and it will be incredibly cold in the winter. And This is a current that goes from the tropics, from the Caribbean, up to Greenland and back, and it keeps the planet in equilibrium. And that current is breaking down. And it has other negative effects. One of the effects is going to plunge Europe into a 1,000-year drought. And another problem is the phytoplankton. The hotter the ocean is, the less the phytoplankton can thrive. And when phytoplankton die off, it darkens the ocean, which heats the planet. Because a big piece of the planet's temperature is its reflectivity. If this planet was entirely black, it would be incredibly hot. If it was entirely white, it would be, in general, extremely cold. And this phytoplankton die-off also stops carbon from being absorbed in a healthy fashion by the ocean, reduces the carbon sequestration, which leads to more CO2 in the atmosphere. And the thermohaline circulation slowdown also creates ocean sink failure, which leads to more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So, returning to my script, the cooling break, aerosol unmasking, the hidden truth, explain that we aren't even feeling the full heat of our actions yet. So as we take some of these aerosols off, the atmosphere will appreciate more how much we have heated the planet, because the more CO2 that's in the atmosphere, the less the Earth can radiate into space its heat to cool the Earth and keep it in equilibrium. So industrial pollution acts as a cooling break or a mask. When we stop the pollution, that mask comes off. This creates a new near-term warming spike. We have to be medics on this battlefield because the transition itself is physically disruptive. And the loss of our medics, sinks and circulation, the ocean engine, transition to the planetary systems block. Over here, boreal forests, ocean heat absorption, phytoplankton, striation, thermohaline, AMOC, slowdown. The ocean is our greatest medic, but it is failing. Phytoplankton and striation. Warming causes the ocean to separate into layers. Striation, this kills the phytoplankton that normally breathe in our CO2. The stall, this is the AMOC and the thermohaline circulation. If this conveyor belt stalls, the ocean sink collapses entirely. Then we get to natural feedbacks. The tipping point, this is where we lose control, the albedo loss. That's over here in the threshold of failure. So our planetary mirror, the Arctic ice, is melting. As white ice turns to dark water, the Earth absorbs heat instead of reflecting it. Methane, that's the final loop. Methane, rising heat releases methane from permafrost, which creates more heat, which releases more methane. At this stage, the Earth is warming itself. So the first act was man and its industrial revolution, injecting huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, as well as other greenhouse gases. The second act is that nature begins to buckle and no longer be able to absorb part of that. So a brake on the heating is destroyed. And then at a certain point, nature itself begins to heat. And there was a good paper written, which was called the trajectories of the Anthropocene, meaning the age of man, where it describes this uh, uh, vicious circle to the point where even if we stopped all industrial activity, what we have here is this bottom block, the system biosphere dissolution. So I want to stop for a moment and talk about the positive side, which is if we do act immediately, which will take great sacrifice, we can halt climate change. Now, 2.3 centigrade above pre-industrial is where we really want to halt it because that will stop most parts of the world from losing their pollinators, bees and such. But right now, the math we have is that it's going to probably halt in the 2.5C to 2.7C, which are catastrophic, but less catastrophic than business as usual, which will drive us all the way up to extremely high temperatures, 5C, 6C, 7C above pre-industrial. What does that mean? It doubles inland. That's one problem. Um, and so that means that if we went to, let's say, 6C at the end of the century, which means a child born today would see that, they'd be 75 years old, 74 years old in 2100 AD, a child born today. Um, that would be about 20 degrees Fahrenheit inland because it's double inland. Um, 20 Fahrenheit. So that means you would see the worst temperatures in the world would be 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Um, and Right now, the highest temperature we ever see is 130. This is absolutely conceivable. In this map, we see that the dark green is largely habitable. This areas are marginally inhabitable. Um, the orange areas are stressed, and the red areas are uninhabitable. And unfortunately, the Middle East, India, China, Indonesia, um, and these are not perfect maps. They need to be worked on, but large parts of the world will be uninhabitable. And just because these areas show a mix of yellow and green marginal and so forth, this is doesn't mean that you will dodge a bullet anywhere in the world. But ultimately, we can stop the heating and then bring it back down. In this particular case, it comes back down in 2250 AD. And by that time, these areas here haven't lost their original wildlife completely. Everywhere else in the world, all the wildlife will have changed. Now, this is a simulation. It's not the only scenario. But let's talk about what are these four scenarios. These are recovered areas where the populations initially neared extinction, but they recovered. So that means that if there were parrots there, there will be parrots there in 2250. These areas recovered ecosystems lacking original biodiversity, everything that used to live there will have died and been replaced. So you could put some rhinos in a zoo, you could cover the zoo with a dome and then cool it, and then 200 years later, you could reintroduce them into the wild. But they will have lost their culture. They will have lost everything that they have learned over the hundreds of thousands and millions of years because they don't have a language. They can't tell their children what to do. So, or elephant. So there will be many species that will be lost, and there will be many species that we may be able to preserve and reintroduce, but they'll sort of be like genetically engineered clones, like resuscitating a woolly mammoth. And then the key is to keep these animals in nature with their cultures so that when they recover, they have that continuity. And then there's the examples of submerged and lost lands, which are hard to see here because we'll be at 10 to 20 meters sea level rise by this time. As you can see, Florida looks extremely small. So I wanted to pause from the difficult business as usual scenario where things get really bad and talk about what we can achieve, which is we can bring the world back into equilibrium gradually, which means that our children and their children and their children can have a future worth living, and that we will not have completely destroyed all of nature during this critical period. So, unless your friends really understand that sacrifice is better than extinction and unlivable future for the next generation, you're going to have to potentially learn some of the science. So, in this particular case, we have this document, The Peril That We Are In, which is the result of uploading masses of scientific reports and analyzing them and looking at how each of these factors affects the other factors. And the first problem we have is that the dry tropics are now producing a half a gigaton of CO2 a year, whereas previously they were a sink. That Greenland is losing ice more rapidly, which leads to less reflectivity and less ability of the ocean to absorb our carbon. The ocean sink in general is in decline. Phytoplankton is dropping every year by several percent. So the combined sink decline recomputes things so that we get to the catastrophic 3C around 2038 to 2044. And I have another video, which you could call Climate Change and AI, where I talk for the first time to this AI Claude, which represents to the user that 3C will occur around 2065. And as soon as I introduce these reports into it and ask it to look at the physics and not the politics, it has to quickly revise and admit that we are in serious harm's way in the next 10 to 20 years, not in the next 30 or 40, because in the next 30 or 40 years, people are able to magically introduce technological interventions that haven't been proven yet and say, oh, well, if it's in 2070, we've got plenty of time, science will fix it. Unfortunately, that may or may not be true, but we do not have until 2070. We have only a few years to stop this train from leaving the station. Um, Now, the let's see here. These are different ways of trying to stop it. Full mobilization, 90% emissions reduction within 10 years, or even more so, 90% within 12 months. In this particular simulation, 90% emissions reduction in 10 years resulted in a 2.2 to 2.6 C uh, peak, at which point we would decline off of that. And in a 12-month, it claimed that we could keep it down to 1.8 to 2.2 C, which would mean we would not lose our bees. Now, of course, there are different countries, different regions. And so we've got a land sink breakdown. Then we've got an ocean sink breakdown. Then we've got the loss of reflectivity from the ice, all of which drives heat up. So review this document, The Peril That We Are In. Talk to research the terms. You can use search online. You can buy books. There's also an excellent article called 130 Degrees by Bill McKibben that was written about 5 years ago that describes all the things that are going to happen. So then the second thing I'd like you to look at is this document here, which will be in the um, summary. So I'm creating a summary document here for being able to make a list of the people that you want to reach out to with some information that you can communicate to them to get this worldwide vote. And that's in that site, worldpeoplescongress.org. So let's see here. So going back to this summary document, the bottom line. So we have the Arctic albedo loss, loss of reflectivity, heat absorption spikes, northern jet stream destabilizes. Um, if we immediate action, that will start happening in 2040. Business as usual, current reform, which is managed collapse 2030 to 2035, and then aerosol unmasking, latent heat unmasks as industry shifts, rapid temperature jump. Then we get to the 2C breach and business as usual. This will happen between 2029 and 2033. This will start to we'll start to lose certain foods. Pollinators will fail, and when pollinators fail, pests come in because the heat is good for pests and bad. It's good for the bad insects, so to speak, and bad for the good insects. And at this point, we will no longer be able to sustain our population of about 8 billion people. We'll be able to have a supportable population of 7 billion. This won't happen until 2070 in an immediate action scenario. And again, dates are estimated, but have been moving closer, not farther away over the last 5 years. At 2.5 C breach, this occurs at 2034 to 2038 in business as usual. I think this is extremely optimistic, saying reform will push this to 2060, 2075. I don't agree with this column here. Um, but in any case, at this point, we drop down to being able to have a 5 billion supportable population. And This is entirely avoided if we have an immediate action. Then at this 3C breach, uh, we will have half of the population of the world die or more because we will not be able to produce food at scale. And this will be entirely avoided if we act immediately. And then the 4C breach, we will only be able to support 1 billion people in the world. And this, according to this reform scenario, is in 2095. But this reform scenario in this simulation is too optimistic. It's not scientifically strong. The immediate action is not bad. The business as usual is pretty accurate. And the final state is that we basically can only support a handful of people in the world when we get to 7 degrees, uh, which will happen sometime after 2055 in business as usual. Here's a list of articles from 2044 to 2024 and 2025. Older articles are here. Um, Tipping points and feedback. This is useful. So soil carbon feedback, rising heat causes microbes to release stored soil carbon faster than plants can absorb it. Biosphere coral die-off, first tipping point crossed, loss of 25% of marine life. This is happening now. Water vapor feedback. Water vapor will double the heat effect, the master loop. Warmer air holds more moisture, doubling the warming from all other gases. Gas release, abrupt permafrost thaw. This will increase the temperature 0.3 C to 0.4 C, almost a half a degree to three-quarters of a degree Fahrenheit. This is in process now. The methane bomb. Methane is 80 times more potent than CO2. It only lasts in the atmosphere about 10 years, but it creates extreme short-term heating and will continue. There's massive amounts of methane in the Arctic seas. They're called methane hydrates and methane clathrates. There's massive amounts of methane in the permafrost. It will leak for centuries. Then there's the aerosol unmasking effect. Uh, Removing industrial global dimming pollutants unmask heat already trapped in the system. The loss of reflectivity from our glaciers and our ice globally, driving temperatures up between 0.5 to 1.5 C. This is total systemic. It's not direct. So it means that the as we lose reflectivity, numerous systems heat and start contributing to carbon in the atmosphere. Then we have the ocean current collapse, which crashes tropical monsoons and traps heat in the southern hemisphere. the subpolar gyre collapse, which rapid cooling in the North Atlantic and warming elsewhere, altering fisheries and coastal weather. Ocean sink failure, the ocean can't trap our carbon. Warmer water holds less gas. Stratification reduces CO2 uptake, leaving more carbon in the atmosphere. The corn trap, so yields drop 50% for corn, wheat, and rice, roughly per degree centigrade. And inland warming is double coastal. So bread baskets become unviable between 2030 and 2045. Boreal forest diebacks, transformation of grassland, fires and pest release, carbon bomb from high latitude soils. For people that are skeptical about climate change, much of this doesn't really matter about whether you believe CO2 causes heating, which it does scientifically. CO2 molecules vibrate in the atmosphere in a way that reflects heat back down instead of letting it dissipate into space. Any, child's video animation can show you this from chemistry. But regardless, many of these problems, as some politicians who are trying to cater to the right try to describe, is if you destroy your forests, your wetlands, your mangrove, things get worse, even without talking about CO2. In some of these cases, um, it should be only a very small percentage of people, if presented with this data, should be able to write all of this off, is what I'm saying. Then there's the Amazon dieback, which could cause global heating of 1.5 C. I question that, but this is loss of the flying river pump drives the region, killing the sink, disrupting global jet streams. So it's not directly from the carbon sink of the Amazon, it's all of the indirect effects. The cryosphere, the West Antarctic ice sheet, the seafloor methane hydrates will begin to release as deep ocean layers warm beyond the 2 degree C thresholds. And the monsoons are going to lead to widespread desertification, the collapse of agriculture for billions of people. So this is dealing with tipping points. Then there's the food ladder. So, in business as usual, in stage one, we have enough food to feed our current population, but the quality degrades. Coffee production lands lost up to 60%. Actually, it's going to be much sooner than 2050. Peanuts face 6% yield loss per degree over 36 centigrade. So then we go to stage one, where we have nutrient famine. So people still have enough calories, but they don't get enough nutrients in their food, and this leads to stunting of people. Pollinator collapse impacts 75% of crops. 50% of croplands become unsuitable for current varieties. Wheat, barley, and lentils suffer immediate net losses. Now we can't support our population anymore. We're talking about potentially 2 billion people who won't be fed, especially with politics, because the way our politics work, wealthy countries will not necessarily distribute food to poor countries, and there will be resource wars. Then we have our marine and tropical failure. We're going to lose all the protein from the sea. That's in stage two at 2.5 C. That contracts our ability to feed people. So back in 2019, when I did my first major video about this, the rule of thumb was for every 1 C of temperature rise, we would lose 1 billion people carrying capacity. But it actually turns out to be worse than that because here we move 1 C and we have 3 billion people we can't feed. So these things are nonlinear, they're exponential because each breakdown affects all the other parts of the system, as we showed in that previous slide. Then we have the staple trap at 3 C, where uh, corn drops 24%, and we have calorie rationing and nations hoarding foods. We have virtually at 3C, we will not have any fruit, we will not have any berries, we will not have coffee, we will not have cocoa, we will not have any spices. We will be eating a very simple diet that's very nutrient poor, and building greenhouses to build all this. It takes 10 to 100 times the energy of just trying to keep our current system, our current climate. So there are technological interventions, but they're incredibly costly. And then when you get to 4C, it's kind of game over because you have the only ability to support less than 1 billion people. And then there's the biodiversity summary. And so this is all available to you. So back in 2019, I was concerned from what I could tell, because I didn't have the information to be able to uh, challenge some of the most extreme climate analysts that thought that we were going to see potentially life-ending events even now in 2025. Now we have a lot more studies, a lot more reports. We have very fine-tuned information, and we can prove why the international consensus is incorrect, which shields us from the truth. So, I also wanted to bring up to you looking at climate change through the lens of food. Global food insecurity under climate change does not arise from a single failure mode. It emerges from the interaction of multiple breakdown domains that amplify one another across biological, hydrological, which is to say, uh, atmospheric moisture in particular, but it includes all water events, infrastructural, economic, and political systems. First, we have thermal stress on crops and agricultural labor. So at the crop level, elevated daytime temperatures reduce photosynthetic efficiency, accelerate phenological development, shorten grain filling periods, and increase evapotranspiration demand. Of particular importance are rising nighttime minimum temperatures, which impair plant respiration and recovery, leading to disproportionate yield losses, even in the absence of extreme daytime heat. Empirical studies show that yield sensitivity to nighttime warming exceeds sensitivity to daytime warming for major staples, including rice, wheat, and maize. At the labor level, agricultural work is constrained by human heat tolerance as wet bulb temperatures rise. This is where you have moderate heat, but high humidity. But the heat is high enough that it's above the body's temperature, and the humidity means we can't sweat it off. So you have brain damage at temperatures of 100 degrees because of the extreme humidity, even lower temperatures. Safe outdoor labor hours decline sharply, particularly in tropical and subtropical regions. This produces a paradoxical condition which crops may remain biologically viable but cannot be planted, tended, or harvested at scale. This labor constraint becomes decisive beyond approximately 2.5 to 3C of global warming in many low latitude regions, contributing to losses independent of agronomic conditions. Then you have pollinator functional collapse. So I'll be publishing this document, um, and I will make sure that it's available now. Yes, it's available now. So let's go ahead and put the food document into the main document, and I'll pause because I don't think we want to walk through the whole document right now. So as pollinators collapse, we are going to lose our access to fruits, vegetables, nuts, legumes, that is beans and oil crops. When we hit 2 to 3C, pollination failure transitions from localized risk to biome scale service collapse. At this stage, yield losses are no longer compensable through management or substitution. Pollinator-dependent crops are primary sources of nutrients, vitamin A, folate, iron, zinc. The decline produces micronutrient famine, increasing mortality, maternal complications, and immune failure, even where staple calories remain available. We also see pest proliferation and predator loss. Predators that would eat the pests. Warming favors agricultural pests disproportionately over crops and their natural predators. Higher temperatures expand pest geographic ranges, increase overall winter survival, shorten generation times, and raise reproductive rates. At the same time, predators and parasitoids decline. This asymmetry produces pest-dominant regimes in which chemical control becomes progressively less effective due to resistance, cost escalation, and shortened application windows. Fungal pathogens also expanded or warmer, more humid conditions, compounding losses, hydrological instability, drought, flood, and variability, flooding, destroying crop seed stock storage facilities and transportation infrastructure, salinization of soils, rivers, and aquifers, which occurs particularly from sea level rise, soil carbon loss and fertility decline. Soils are a critical but fragile component of food production. Rising temperatures accelerate microbial respiration, reducing soil organic carbon and degrading structure. Extreme rainfall increases erosion, while drought suppresses biological activity. Fertilizer and energy coupling. Modern agriculture is tightly coupled to fossil energy through fertilizer production, mechanization, irrigation and transport. Nitrogen fertilizer depends on natural gas. Phosphate and potash are geographically concentrated and geopolitically sensitive. Energy price volatility, conflict, and export controls translate directly into fertilizer scarcity. Storage, chain, and infrastructure failure. Food loss increasingly occurs after harvest. Heat, flooding, and power outages disrupt storage and refrigeration, while storms and low water levels impair transport. Grain silos, ports, and roads are vulnerable to both heat and flood damage. The loss of fisheries and marine protein from the acidification of the ocean. And what does this all mean? Um, what are the food system consequences under accelerating climate stress, selectively removing foods based on biological sensitivity, ecological dependence, storage requirements, and exposure to hydrological and thermal extremes? So we see at 1.5 to 2C, which is occurring soon, yield collapse of coffee, of cocoa at 2C, at 2 to 2.3C, almonds and tree nuts, leafy vegetables at 2 and 2.5C, fruits and berries, apples, stone fruit at 2 and 2.5C, vegetable oils at 2 to 3 to 2.7C, rice at 2.3 to 3C, wheat at 2.5 to 3C, corn or maize at 2.5 to 3C, beans and lentils at 2.5 to 3C, fish at 2 to 2.7C, dairy, beef, poultry, black pepper, vanilla, cinnamon, saffron, chilies, turmeric. So countries will be lose their cuisines because they will no longer be able to use spices. They will no longer be growing the things they used to grow because the temperature bands are going to be moving northward from the tropics. So the weather of Oregon tomorrow will be California's weather today, and so forth. Nutrient dense foods fail first. Protein systems collapse unevenly. Staples persist but degrade. And you end up with, by price, coffee becomes luxury at 3C, cocoa luxury at 3C, spices luxury at 3C, fruits worse than luxuries, elite dominated access, vegetables rationed local only at 3C, vegetable oils rationed, rice rationed, wheat rationed. Corn is prioritized as a feed, I should presume, for meats. Uh, Legumes are intermittently available at 3C. Fish is rare at 4C. Regional collapses at 2C. Shellfish is rare at 3C. Dairy is rationed at 3C. Meat is elite only at 3C. Dairy, poultry is rationed at 3C. Ultra processed calories become the only available food as things heat. And we get into foods by climate vulnerability and likely failure mode. And this really strikes at the heart of it because we start to destroy our environment to create new lands to grow food as our lands become infertile, destroyed, salinated, or flooded from sea level rise. And we deal with food insecurity. At 2C, we lose the ability to feed 1 to 2 billion of our population, one in every four people, one in every three people at 2.3C, one in every 2.5 people at 2.7. More than half of the human race cannot be fed at 3C. Only one in three people can be fed at 3.5C. At 4C, it's one in four. At 4.5C, it's one in seven. At 5C, it's one in 10 or less. And at 6C, we have just a handful of people left, 200 million to 500 million who can be fed. And at 7C, 50 million to 200 million. And all of this can be avoided if we act now. So there's a lot of resources. They're all posted both in the briefing section on the World People's Congress, as well as, let's see here in the uh, document that I have in the voting section, which I will post in the footnotes. So let's break here for now. I hope you now have enough information to get 10 of your friends to agree to talk to 10 of their friends so we can put an immediate halt to this nightmare. Thank you.